Hi, good afternoon. My name is Samme Allen. I'm from Sequoia Venue Solutions, and I'm really excited about this session. Our only problem with it is it's going to be 30 minutes, and that's just not going to be enough. If you have questions, let's not leave it to 5 minutes before the end, because also at 2:30, you're going to want to stay and see the next session, which is absolutely going to link seamlessly from what we talk about and what we discuss today. Now, I'm just going to give them very top-line introductions so that we can scene set. Emily is the Diversity and Inclusion Manager for Oath. Now, hands up who knows who Oath is. You will in a second. Well done, Ed. You are the organizer. You should know. We would be in an awkward position if you weren't. So Emily is the Diversity and Inclusion Manager for EMEA and Global Lead for the Employee Resource Group. Anyone know who that is? They're going to shortly, aren't they? Oath is the integration of AOL and Yahoo. Anyone know who AOL and Yahoo are? Yeah, I thought we are awake. With 50+ brands, including Huffington Post, RYOT Studios, and Tumblr, they aim to create a diverse organization that's truly representative of their consumers and brands. So she's got a pretty big job on her hands, and we'll find out more about this. Welcome, Chieu. Welcome, Emily. Welcome, Chieu. They didn't know until today that they actually have a past life together as well, which we will share, the joys of LinkedIn. So Chieu is the co-founder of Perkbox, which we're going to learn about, the UK's fastest growing employee engagement platform. 7,000 customers, so, you know, he knows his stuff here. Chieu established himself as a tech marketing force, to be reckoned with, leading initiatives with brands including Microsoft, Amazon, and Yahoo, where Emily worked, but they didn't know each other. Welcome, and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
Now, we've got a really big session title, as you all know. So with that big question in mind, and the fact that we only have 30 minutes, what makes you, Chieu, and your business an innovator of workplace culture? If you can share some insights with us.
First of all, thanks for having me. So at Perkbox, we're an employee engagement business platform. So we help businesses engage, motivate, and retain their staff. And so we talk about culture, we see it as one big experiment. It's like, how can we make this really work? And our belief is that great companies are built on great culture. So you can have great performance as well as a great culture. They're not mutually exclusive. So in that vein, we experiment a lot. We bring in a whole lot of different services and programs, right? So we believe that for an employee to be truly motivated, you have to see them holistically. So yes, let's engage them, give them tools, educate them, promote them, make sure that they are delivering to the best of their ability. So we have programs like online education and what have you. But what about their emotional well-being and the physical well-being? So we have programs like EAP, so looking at the employee's mental well-being. So things like...
Can you tell us what an EAP is? Because we are an industry full of acronyms.
Sure.
And we'd like another one.
Yeah, so EAP, it's actually really important. So we know that mental illness is a big problem in the industry, across the marketplace. About 25% of people have some form of mental illness, yet they don't want to talk about it. It's a bit of a taboo. So EAP is an acronym for Employee Assistance Program. So it's a phone line or a program that you can just call and talk about your challenges, your mental challenges. Mental health, I mean. And so when we talk about being an innovator, we want to look at the employee holistically and try different programs. And because we're a perk provider, a benefits provider, we want to be the guinea pig and to talk to our clients. So we have 7,000 businesses, but we have 500,000 employees of these businesses. So we want to be able to try things out, tell our clients that, hey, this works, this doesn't work. Have really quirky things like dogs and beers on Fridays and all the fun things, but that doesn't take away from performance and high productivity. So that's really what we're trying to prove here, that you can have an amazing workplace and yet still be very successful.
Excellent. Emily,
Following
that, from the client perspective, how do you and your business become this innovator in workplace culture?
So it's definitely been a journey for us since the inception of Oath. We ultimately took two very different cultures, Yahoo and AOL, and brought them together. So we had to be really aware of those existing cultures and not taking away, but adding. So we had to be very innovative, but we're also a house of 50+ brands that have their cultures within them. So a Huffington Post is going to be very different than a Riot Studios. ultimately we're building brands that people love, right? So you're thinking about how you're building products and brands that people love, but you have to have the people internally love them as well. So you need to create, first and foremost, I think, a space where everyone can be safe. And going to your EAP, Employee Assistance Program, you know, that's something that we definitely have and use, because it's important that you feel safe, but you show up as your best self. So how do we do that? And a lot of the ways we do that is through our employee resource groups, so our ERGs. So we have 9 employee resource groups, which are dedicated to these communities, various diverse communities, and helping them to engage across our workforce, workplace, and marketplace. So we're always constantly thinking about how we're showing up outside, how we represent that, and then how do we bring that back in as well. So I think it's a number of things that you have to do to be innovative. You have to kind of take that leap and try something that's different. I think the most different thing that we did recently through our employee resource groups and the diversity and inclusion team was we actually acquired some portraits and gifted them to the National Portrait Gallery. It's the first of its kind Afro-Caribbean permanent collection that will be in the National Portrait Gallery. It's with an artist, Simon Frederick, from Black is the New Black. So that's really important for us to, you know, ultimately do what we're saying we're doing. So how do we bring that inside for all the creativity we have and stimulate that through workspace, open space, and collaborative spaces, and then going out into the markets as well.
Interesting that you said about stress employee assistance programs that you both have. I'm sure some of the audience will know, if you've been part of EventWell in the program, that actually event coordination has been cited as the 5th most stressful job in America, according to a specific survey. And it was survey details of some quite specific things. So when we first looked at it as an industry, we laughed, and then we just realized actually this is quite serious. How many people in the audience, sorry, I'm going to do a little bit of this so that we can understand, because both of these guys don't know our sector. How many people have an employee assistance program within their own businesses? So this is great, so about 30%. How do those other half of the room, or 2/3 of the room, how do you start with this sort of activity? And how do you start, you know, whether you are from an employee point of view and then maybe from an employer point of view as well?
Got it. Yeah. So from an employee point of view, I'd say speak your mind, right? Talk to your manager and move up the chain on that basis, because you are entitled to this. You know, in the sense that, you know, great workplaces need to provide this for you. So definitely speak your mind. And what we found out is, you know, most millennials are of that nature anyway. So we employ most of the millennials, and they're quite vocal. And so talks amongst yourselves. You say, look, I have this condition, or I have this need, you have as well. Why don't we just come together, create a bigger group, and go to management? So that gives you stronger representation. From a management point of view, it starts from the top. You know, you need to understand what your responsibilities are as a business owner, as a manager, to provide your staff with the right kind of care and support. Right? This industry, as what Sam's saying, is very stressful. So you need to offset that somehow. You have to be empathetic. You need to really think what your team's going through and give them that support. And it's basic management, really, but we need to talk about it for it to be really successful, right? Especially around mental well-being. You know, stress is part of that. And a lot of people don't want to talk about mental well-being and the stress, you know, the things associated with that. So that's where it starts, really. A bit of empathy and a bit of communication.
So it's keeping on talking. Do you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's encouraging that conversation. That goes to making sure your employees feel safe, that they can be themselves. We talk about authentic self and best self. You know, there's 2 sides to that, but ultimately allowing that individual to show up in whichever way that they feel comfortable showing up in, right? So creating that space for people to share their stories and saying it's okay to be you, whatever that means. Going back to our employee resource groups, these are voluntary-led, employee-led. So they do this, employees do this on top of their day job in terms of making our space really a community as well. So neurodiversity is one of our employee resource groups, and that's focused on minds of all kinds. And it's there to encourage these conversations. They work on actually holding workshops, talking about these things and saying that actually we're all neurodiverse, we're all different, and that's okay. But just be open about that. And to your point, it goes to senior leadership. And At least in our space, long are the days of offices, closed offices, and senior leaders really understand that closing those doors close off all of their employee engagement as well, and makes them unapproachable. So taking down those four walls and opening that up to say, we're here to have that conversation, it's okay to be you, and then giving employees the resources like the Employee Assistance Program, Employee Relations Program, a place they can go to outside of just HR, because sometimes people feel that HR is there for the company, not the people. They are there for the people too, you know, but that where else can they go if they don't feel comfortable? And those employee assistance programs give them that hotline that's completely confidential to do that.
Yeah, I think there's some organizations that still have their HR departments, or they perceive that they're in an ivory tower, completing forms and not really interested in anything other than process, which is something that you need to sort of change now as the leaders in human resources. That's what it is. With the multiple brands that you've got underneath here, I'm fascinated. What happens if you have a rogue brand? Because we all have rogue departments and rogue people in our organizations. So I'm just trying to thread it through. Now you're managing this huge set of brands. What do you do with the naughty ones?
So the brands really, again, we want them to exist within their own right. And that's kind of, Oath is a house of brands, but those brands live and breathe in their own right alone, right? So we can't say that Huffington Post has to be like Riot Studios or Tumblr, because that's crazy. Tumblr is a completely different platform than Huffington Post. What we try and do is stream diversity and inclusion throughout everything. So, encouraging the conversations and stuff throughout all of those brands and making sure that it's on top of their agenda. So, for example, Riot, I'm working with Riot on how do we actually create diverse content that's going to go out to our consumers. Huffington Post has launched Born and Raised. Recently, they went out to Birmingham to do kind of a voices, right? So let's hear from people outside of London, because so much of our media and news is based in London, right? So I wouldn't say we have naughty brands, so to speak. I would
Not
say
that you can say to us because it's recording.
No. They all play their part in creating that culture, because ultimately our world is diverse, right? And we're all so different, so those brands need to be different. And as long as we're building products that are, catering to the diverse world we live in, and that's only going to happen with diverse teams and diverse thought.
We're quite a diverse sector ourselves. In fact, I think if you asked everybody in the room what part of the industry they work in, they'd say something different, where we are mice, we're vermin. We are meetings, we're conferences, exhibitions, experiential, experienced. So we're also we're diverse as a culture. How many people here run their own business? Just so we get a... how many people are sort of self-employed freelancers? Couple. And how many people, you're going to be everything, Glenn. And how many people work for someone else who are, okay. So we've got a diverse range of people in a diverse sector of industry. How, as the employer, do we set our engagement, our workplace culture to fit everybody? There's a lot of talk about millennials, but there's a lot of oldies like me in our industry still. So how do you create a program that's going to incentivize, and then how do you, most importantly, measure it?
I think we start by measuring, really. So have a survey that goes out. So we have what we call Perkbox Pulse Survey, which short, snappy surveys that pops up, and you can measure the sentiment. So before you can actually deploy a program, you need to know what they want. You need to know what drives, what motivates your staff, and what are the things that need to be fixed right away. So definitely encourage surveying. And it's a nasty word. I mean, survey is very old and clunky. So we really need to find ways of getting feedback, right? It could be, you can have what we call brand ambassadors, or culture ambassadors, where there are these people in the organization that everyone loves to talk to, right? So we have an individual called Maddie. She's amazing. She's like bubbly. She does our events as well. So she just goes around talking to people. So I'll go up to her and say, hey, Maddie, how's everyone? It's like, how are the people? And whatever she says, okay, I take that and I do a survey, compare what she says versus what the company is saying. It gives me a good sense of what's really happening. So really, get a good sense of what's happening and then start tailoring it to the needs of the individuals. Yes, there are demographic differences, and the best organizations have the ability to integrate people, to bring the best out of people, to have programs where it's for millennials or programs for family-oriented people. So it is about knowing what you have. I think there's lots of benefits in the marketplace and perks and programs. You need to take time and figure out what works for you. And some things are not expensive at all, just having dogs run around the office or drinks and what have you, depending on your culture, right? So that's what we have. Do what works for you, obviously. So it's compliant. So your culture needs to be compliant with the demographic that you have. And that's really where culture excels. There's no right culture or wrong culture. It's what works for you.
Emily, you're nodding because I'm going to ask for an example now in terms of that, so that what's the output? Because we're all about measuring output, measuring success. So have you got an example of a program or something that the business has done and the results that you've got from it in terms of engagement or profitability? Because ultimately, that's what bosses are going to want to see.
So diversity as a whole is profitable for business. End of, period. That's just the way it is. And there's a lot of studies that talk about that. The McKinsey study that was done in 2015, that's been revised in 2017. Ultimately, that is profitable. So how do you bring that conversation to senior leaders and say that this is something that is imperative? Again, end of. And that's kind of hard. So starting with surveys, again, clunky kind of, people are like, but you have to understand in the day of GDPR and data collection and everything that's going on, you have to tell a story that gets people to want to share that information. So it's not just a survey and everyone fill it out. What's the story behind the survey? What are you trying to achieve in that survey, and making sure that the employees understand that, so that they're willing to take that survey with honesty and integrity as well, and using it as a platform to get their feedback heard. So there's that. Following the gender pay gap, we realized that actually, as a whole, that there was some disparity in terms of where the women in our business were sitting, that we felt a drop at senior leadership. So what do we do to encourage that? So through our employee resource group, they came to me, it's called the Women's Inclusion Network. So WIN came to me and said, obviously this is an issue. We need to do something about this. I say, I hear you. So what can we do? We established a coaching program for all females across the organization in the UK. That was 250 females that we coached across 2 sessions. Now, we didn't keep those sessions to personal development, executive leadership. We also introduced finance, wellness, the whole kit and caboodle, because ultimately everyone's different. And as you've said, what are we trying to achieve? What is that culture for those people, right? And everyone's different. So it's not just about perhaps scaling in the organization. It might be how, and your personal life feeds into your work life consistently. So how do you do that, right? And how do you scale it? So we want to provide that opportunity. We did survey after that too, and the engagement has increased massively, and the program went down a treat. Now, how do we scale that globally? So that's going to be the next piece. And furthermore, how are we scaling it across the business? Should we just be focusing on women? Is this something we need to do further afield, and building programs for everyone, right? So you start small, you see how it works, and then you try and scale it for the type of business we're in, which is 10,000 plus employees ultimately.
Yeah, so start small, but start with something.
Yeah, and using those surveys to understand where you're at as well.
Ask the question before, start small, ask again, measure.
Yeah, and
tweak
take the journey, with them in terms of sharing that story, making sure you're transparent with people. So we're taking this survey because X, Y, and Z. Yeah. The results of the survey were this, and this is what we're going to do about that. So being really methodological.
We're an industry that loves a good survey. I promised that I would intersperse with some questions. Has anybody got a burning question that they'd like to ask? Because I can see the time ticking. Have we got a microphone for the questions? Oh. What? It totally clashes with my outfit. No.
It's slightly off topic, but
You'll just speak into it a little bit louder, I think.
Is that working?
Yeah.
Can you hear it?
So we obviously, most people in this room organise events. I organise particularly conferences. So I'm in-house, so how can the conferences that I arrange, how can I kind of build workplace culture into the conferences? What would your tips for that be?
Did you get that? That's a great question. How do you build the workplace culture within conferences of which these people are organising hundreds and hundreds of a year?
And they're away from their office, you're saying.
Yeah.
They're very dispersed. And how do you
Maybe
create a
something,
culture? That's a really good question. And we
Really
do get
good
a lot
question.
we do get a lot of clients who have premise-based work, warehouse work, where they are actually on their own for big chunks of the day. It starts with communication. Communication in the sense that you can, there are apps, there are online programs where you can deploy things through the mobile. Like we have it as a program, but the reality is you don't need to have a Perkbox kind of app or setup to kind of say, I care about you, right? Just send emails, send Slack messages, what have you. These messages are really important, right? Emojis, what have you. So it gives you, create some sort of ritual is really what I'm saying. So, you start off the day, send up some SMS or some notifications, say, hey, look, you guys are gonna smash it today. Really, really, good luck. And then that becomes what you do all the time. And so, look, we're with you. So use technology is really what I'm saying, to really leverage the distance and just be human about it, as if they're in the office. Yeah?
Yeah, so in terms of taking your own culture and instilling that into the events that you do, I think it's showing up and being true to who you are as an organization. If for you the wellness piece is huge, then bring that to the conferences in some element. Making sure that that's represented in your panels as well. So who are you choosing for your panels? And making sure that they're representative of the values that you have in your organization. It's really imperative to live by those values and to continue to have those values. And as Oath, we talk about, these values that we live by. We hope you show up with them outside, and that's things like we before me and committing to conclusion and raising the bar. Those are things that you want to do in your own life, right? So how do you bring that and feed that in? So I would be making sure that you're just careful about how you show up yourself and how you're choosing to represent that in your event as well.
Does that answer the question for you? Excellent. Has anybody else got a question? Everyone's frantically writing bits and pieces down. A really big question, but we might as well start. I know that we start small and then we measure, but as we said, we've got quite diverse workforces here. We work crazy hours. Does anyone here work 9 to 5? Yeah, there you go. What? One lady just did that very quietly. With the type of events that we run, and our words are all crazy. So we're out of the office. Where do you see the culture, the workplace, because we're saying it is increasingly becoming more and more diverse in terms of age groups as well as diversity. What's going to be that baseline in, say, 5 years' time? Where do we need to be thinking? Because we are constantly chasing our tails in our industry because we're running events, we're so busy. But in terms of how we keep our staff, because retention is a big, big challenge in our sector. What's the baseline in 3 to 5 years? What do we need to be saying this is an absolute given for an organization that's going to succeed in business? Emily.
Yeah, so again, going back to what we kind of focus on, workforce, workplace, marketplace. Workplace is huge, right? So you need to be thinking about things like, do you have gender-neutral bathrooms? Do you have a mother's room? Do you have a multi-faith room? And I know we're a much larger organization, but are there spaces, if you're not having those precise rooms, spaces for people to go to have those moments? So that's kind of that more physical. Then it's being flexible. So we actually have an activity-based working, that's what we call it. And that's just been created in the new Oath office here in London. And what that means is that's collaboration spaces. So we've stripped the cubicles, there are no allocated desks. So actually, I don't have a desk. I don't come in and work in the same place. I work in a collaborative space. There are people that are anchors because there are health reasons and ergonomic reasons we need to have precise anchors, but it's a fluid space. Work in all the different areas. Take your laptop to the kitchen. Go, to sit in a huddle. There's so many different spaces to work within. But ultimately, it's being flexible. I report into the US. Most of my team is in the US. I'm the only one based outside of the US. So there's sometimes that my calls start at 2. Most of the time they start at 2 p.m. and they go on till 9. So what does that mean for me? I work my day around that. I might come in later and I'm on the phone till 9, you know? So we allow people to be flexible and adaptable to what suits them. The future of it is, again, you know, we're working in this diverse world. We're trying to serve a diverse population. Teams are going to be all over the world. You're not necessarily going to have offices. And I think now the tech industry has really set a bar of what these spaces are looking like the Amazon offices and Microsoft, Facebook, work hard, play hard. But you have to have that to stimulate creativity and collaboration and innovation as well. Yeah. So
there's a similarity between the tech world and what we do in terms of content, collaboration, creativity. Have you got something more that would like to add to that? You know, where's the baseline for us? What's the, you know, non-negotiable for the next 3 to 5 years?
I think everything Emily said. I think that the other key component is getting into people's head, understanding what's happening. So better measurement tools, psychographic measurement tools. So really, I mean, this is a bit more techy, but really understand what really drives your employees. Yes, physical space is important, but measuring their stress levels, measuring, you know, understanding what their aspirations are. Are they doing jobs that they can do when they're asleep? Are they being stimulated? So all these types of measurement tools will be much more improved and more sophisticated. But the important thing is that management should be catching up. That these tools are there, but the most important thing is, are your managers you know, trained and you know, motivated to interpret this information and act on it? So that's really what I hope to see in the future.
And that is an absolute perfect segue into the next session with Laura. So if you haven't got plans, please don't move from your seat because the next session will bring this into practice. But can I just say a massive thank you to our 2 experts, Emily and Chieu. Thanks so much.